All right, so we've done a lot of work in compiling our application. We're passing data from parent component to child component. We're looping over the JSX to render a list of tracks. We have lots of good stuff here, but right now our app is pretty static. It doesn't change at all. It looks pretty good. It's looking a lot better than it was before, but we don't have any button to play. It always says paused. We don't know whose playlist this is. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of additional magic, which we call state in React. And so here's how we're going to do that. Now, state used to be managed in a number of ways, but the way we manage state now, or at least the recommended way by the React team, is to import use state from React. Now, a good way to remember this is that props is data in your components that doesn't change, and state is component or data in your components that do change. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say const, and we'll say, let's call this like user, set user equals use state. And you can see here this use state function from React. It returns a stateful value and a function to update it. Now, it returns an array, but what I'm doing here is I'm destructuring out the first item of the array, which is the stateful value, and I'm destructuring the second item in the array, which is a function to update the stateful value. So that's why I've named them user and set user. And I'm going to name this user Mickey. Now, the other way you could do this is you could say const state stuff equals use state Mickey. And then you could say const user equals state stuff 0. Const set user equals state stuff 1. But this is 3 lines of code, and it's kind of hard to understand what exactly this is doing here. So most of the time, almost always, you will see hooks defined like this, where the array is destructured and the first item in the array is given the name of the variable, the state variable, that changes the stateful value. And the second item is the function to update this stateful value. Now, again, otherwise this works exactly the same. So if I come here and I say, what do we call this person? Actually, let's not even pass it down. Let's just use it. H1, let's say users playlist, like this. And I save this and I come back here. We'll see Mickey's playlist up there. And no matter what, this function, or excuse me, the stateful value will always be Mickey because I'm never calling the set user state updater to change this. So is this really a good use of state? No, I wouldn't use state for something like this. I would probably pass it in to the app function or the app component as a prop. But it's a good way to at least show you what this use state syntax looks like. Now, a good example for it is, let's head back to our playlist component. And in our playlist component, let's define some data here that we know is going to change. Let's say import use state from React. And again, notice that we're saying we're destructuring out use state from, we could also say import React from React and then say const data set data equals react.use state and then pass it whatever here. But almost always, or most of the time, you'll see people do this. They'll destructure out the use state call from React so you don't have to import the whole React module. And so this, let's think really quickly about the data that is going to change in this component. And so the data that does change here is we know that this paused is not always going to be paused. Sometimes it's going to be playing. And so we can say, let's call it status, and set status equals use state paused. And then let's change this here to use that status stateful variable. And we'll save this, and we'll come back here, and we will see that it still says paused. Everything looks good. Now, what if we want to change this status? Let's create another button here. And ooh, this is a play button. Yeah, let's do a couple things here. Let's make a div with a class name equals button play pause, because it's going to hold a play pause button. And then inside there, we're going to create a span with a class name equals, and I'm going to use let's use a JavaScript ternary here. So we have the status, right? Right now the status says paused. Well, first let's just close it like this. And let's say status equals paused. And if it does, we'll give it the paused class. Otherwise, we'll give it the playing class. And then here, and let's just put click here. We'll make it fancy now. And then let's give it let's create a function that'll handle whenever we click on this button here. So we'll call it handle on play, pause, click. And it'll be a function that will just determine how to set this status. So if the status is equal to paused, we'll set the status. We'll use that set status changer, updater, and we'll set it to playing. Else, if status is equal to playing, set status. Did I say set state? I meant set status here. Set status paused. Now, there are better ways to do this, but this works fine. And all this function does is it checks to see what's stored in this variable and either sets it to playing if it's already paused or it sets it to paused if it's already playing. And so then we can just take this function and we can use an on-click handler in React. And an on-click handler is pretty simple. You just say on, and then you use capital C on click like this, and then you pass it the function that you want to run whenever you click on this span. So now I save this. I'm going to head over here. I see this click. That doesn't look great, but if I click it, we'll notice that up over here, it says playing. Now it says paused, playing, paused, playing, paused. So we can see that every time we click on this, and it doesn't matter what else we do, we can keep refreshing it or playing with this button, and it'll toggle between the playing and the paused state by using the set status state updater. And that is how state is useful, is it maintains the state regardless of what else we do in this application, as long as we have some logic that determines what should be rendered and when and how that state should be updated. And so the really cool thing about this is it makes sure that our UI is just a reflection of the data we pass to it. And that is one of the most powerful things about React, is it ensures that the UI you render is just a reflection of the data you pass to it. So in other applications, if you have a bunch of event handlers, you're not really sure what's happening in your app and where. React makes it really easy to know exactly what's happening, where it's happening, and why. And again, this is just one of the other benefits of React that people tend to enjoy. And so let's start to see how we can build some complex state in the next video.